Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories this hour. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says he expects a strong US reaction if Russian leader Vladimir Putin refuses a bilateral meeting. He notes it is unclear what territorial concessions Moscow might offer, adding that Budapest as a venue for future talks is challenging. Ukrainian officials say a Russian attack killed one person and injured at least 18, striking a US electronics manufacturer in Mukashevko. Authorities report 15 hurt in a missile strike that destroyed storage facilities, as the region's governor confirmed the plant produced consumer electronics. The Israel Defense Force says it has begun the first steps of its controversial military assault on Gaza City after calling up tens of thousands of reservists. This comes as the Netanyahu government considers a new ceasefire deal accepted by Hamas to pause nearly 2 years of war. Hamas has responded to the start of Israel's new attack on Gaza City, calling it a blatant disregard for efforts to broker a ceasefire and hostage release deal. Critics inside and outside of Israel warn that the new offensive will endanger hostages, displace hundreds of thousands, and worsen an already dire humanitarian crisis. US Vice President J.D. Vance and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth visit National Guard troops at Union Station amid protests chanting "Free DC." The scene marks the latest flashpoint in President Trump's crackdown across the nation's capital. President Donald Trump's administration has imposed sanctions on 2 judges and 2 prosecutors at the International Criminal Court over the arrest warrant issued for Israeli officials. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio called the court a national security threat and an instrument of lawfare against the US and Israel. US Vice President J.D. Vance says European nations must play the lion's share for Ukraine security guarantees as Kiev demands protection from Russian aggression. He notes Russia seeks some Ukrainian territories while President Trump pushes a peace deal that rules out US troops but could include American air support. President Xi Jinping urges unity during a surprise visit to Lhasa, marking 60 years since China established the autonomous region after annexing Tibet. Xi praises local officials for fighting separatism, but his speech avoids any mention of the Dalai Lama, who has lived in exile since 1959. Now we start with updates from the Russia-Ukraine conflict, where President Volodymyr Zelensky has said that there is no signal from Moscow that Russia is ready to end the war or engage in substantial conversations. He warned that if Russia is not ready for a bilateral leaders' meeting, Ukraine and Europe expect a strong response from the United States. Zelensky also condemned Russia's attack on American enterprise in Zaporizhzhia region, which injured 15 people. Ukraine's Air Force reported that Russia launched 574 drones and 40 missiles in overnight strikes, shooting down 546 drones and 31 missiles. Attacks hit 11 locations, with debris falling on 3 areas, according to reports. A missile also struck a consumer electronic plant in Mukashevko, injuring 15, while an attack in Lviv killed 1, injured 3 and damaged 26 homes. Foreign Minister Audrey Sabia called the strikes against civilian facilities unacceptable and stressed the need to pressure Russia to end the war. We're now joined by 2 guests to discuss this. We're joined by Professor Veselin Popovsky, who's a professor and vice dean at Jindal Global Law School, located in Bulgaria. And we're also joined by Professor Georgi Toleraya. He's an international affairs expert joining us from Moscow. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us here on NewsX World. Professor Popovsky, I wanted to start with you. Ukrainian President Zelensky says there are no signals from Moscow ending the war. From Kiev's perspective, what would constitute a credible sign that Russia is in fact serious about peace?
Well, the only signal is to stop the fire, nothing else. Russia continues to shoot, to fight. They sent 614, one of the most massive aerial attacks in recent weeks, as a response to a lot of diplomacy going on. So simple answer here. Russia is not interested in peace. It's not even interested in ceasefire. So all the talks in Alaska between Trump and Putin are gone into the dustbin. Russia doesn't follow on anything. They even refuse trilateral or bilateral meeting with Zelensky, talking about before the meeting, we need to agree on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which means it's simply a delaying tactics, clearly showing that Vladimir Putin doesn't want to stop the war. He wants to continue killing Ukrainian people non-stop. And I must say, there is no life for Putin outside this war. There is no peace for Russia. Putin cannot tell the troops to go back home because these millions of soldiers, they have no other life without killing. They will go and they will do crimes all over Russia, like exactly what the Afghani troops during the Soviet times did after the end of the Soviet aggression in Afghanistan. For Vladimir Putin, there is no end of the war because it's end of his regime, by the way.
Yes, I wanted to bring Professor Tolaraya in here. As we've said, Russia has launched a huge barrage of aerial attacks on Ukrainian soil. In response, President Zelensky says Moscow is not serious about peace, although a bilateral meeting between the two presidents has not been ruled out this time. It has been refused previously. Professor Tolaraya, how does Russia respond to the accusation that Moscow is not ready to talk?
Well, first of all, I don't even want to comment the cheap propaganda I heard from my predecessor on this channel. Because given the possibility to spread such cheap propaganda, I think it's a bad journalism. What is true is that if we talk about the security guarantees for Ukraine, we must find a solution, we must talk. And this is what Russia is prepared to do. And this is something that we're talking with Americans. Zelensky cannot get any signals because he's not a party of these negotiations. The negotiations on the security guarantees, which is essential for the final peace deal, had been already discussed in Istanbul 3 years ago, but then the British prevented Ukraine from accepting them. And so the war continued for 3.5 years, killing millions of people. This is entirely the guilt of British and Americans and Europeans who supported this war and who are giving support to Ukraine. Russia wants to have a just and lasting peace, not a ceasefire which would let Ukrainians to rearm and to let the Europeans send more arms for continuing the killings of Russia. Not only the missiles and drones are flying from Russia to Ukraine. On the contrary, the more and more drones coming into Russia proper. Today, the nuclear plant in New Voronezh have been attacked by Ukrainian drone. There's a crazy thing to do. There's a crazy thing to do to attack the nuclear plant. This is the danger threat to whole Europe. And all this propaganda exercise on the part of Zelensky and his European sponsors and conservative part of American establishment is aimed at one thing: to prolong the war, to prolong the killing, and not to find a real peace deal. In fact, I would say that the words peace deal in Russia sounds like something very rude. He lied. That's the meaning of these words, the sound with phonetics of it's in Russian. So we're very skeptical about the real intentions of Europeans and Zelensky proper. Before talking to Putin, before he's given the honor to talk to Putin, he must provide something. He must provide something which we can talk about and which we can see as a final solution to the conflict.
Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. We do have some more updates coming from the conflict to discuss. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says Kyiv expects clarity on new security guarantees within the next 7 to 10 days. He added that once an understanding is reached, Ukraine plans to move forward with a series of bilateral and trilateral leaders' meetings. Zelensky also made clear that China will not be a part of the security framework. He said Beijing was excluded because it did not provide assistance to Ukraine after Russia's full-scale invasion. Now we move on to some more updates. According to reports, Ukraine will commit to purchasing $100 billion worth of American weapons and strike a $50 billion deal with the United States to produce drones, and all in an effort to secure US guarantees for its security after a peace deal with Russia. The report states that Europe will finance Ukraine's $100 billion weapons commitment to the United States. The proposal also includes a $50 billion deal to produce drones with Ukrainian companies which have become experts in the technology following the start of the conflict. Ukraine's locally developed long-range Flamingo cruise missile has begun mass production. The Flamingo missile is designed for strategic strikes at ranges of up to 3,000 kilometers. These features were cross-referenced and seem to align closely with the FP5 cruise missile, previously displayed by the UK-based Millennium Group at the Index 2025 Defence Exhibition. We now move on once again to further updates. Ukrainian President... Okay, apologies there, we have. Professor Popovsky, I wanted to come to you first once again. The Ukrainian president says he expects clarity on new security guarantees between 7 and 10 days. What type of assurances are you looking for here, military, economic, or political?
Well, definitely they need to be clarified because there are different suggestions from different parts. And for that matter, obviously, United States can provide Air Force, British and French can provide troops on the ground. It should look very much like Article 5 of the NATO treaty, which basically says that after the ceasefire or the peace deal, any further attack by Russia on Ukraine, every single bullet coming from Russia will be responded with the entire force of NATO, including United States, including all the other members. No less than that will satisfy Ukraine because they are victim of attack over 3.5 years. They lost so many civilian lives. Everything Georgi said is absolutely Kremlin propaganda. Ukraine doesn't target Russian civilian targets, only military targets. So for that matter, Russia is an aggressor. Russia is a war criminal every day, every week. So the end of the conflict under international law should come with strong security guarantees. And for the moment, we don't see very much clarity. And that's exactly what President Zelensky is seeking for, to clarify before eventual meeting with President Putin.
Okay, Professor Tolerai, I just want to finish with you. Zelensky does say that Kyiv is close to securing new security guarantees. How does Moscow view these efforts? And we are running out of time here, so if you could keep your answer brief, that would be amazing.
All right, I won't comment on my colleague Veselin's remarks, but I would say that Zelensky and Ukraine is not in a position to determine what kind of guarantees they will satisfied or which are not satisfied. First, you should win on the battlefield before being able to dictate your conditions. And the security guarantees we're talking about, I think the general idea that it should be taken by the permanent members of the UN Security Council is absolutely sound and in conformity with international law. I don't think that Russia will ever agree to foreign troops stationed in its neighborhood, especially a hostile neighbor hostile NATO troops. So that's not a non-starter. That's a non-starter. So we should find for some solution which will include political guarantees of non-aggression and non-conflict, because we are sure that Ukrainians, even after the peace deal, after they sign the peace, will provoke the Donbass and other their former regions, and they will present it as if Russia is attacking. So this will be just a continuation of the conflict. We should find a lasting solution, which will include the UN permanent member security guarantees.
Yes, thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us, Professor Veselin Popovsky and Professor Toleraya. Thank you for taking the time to speak to us. We have a further update just to finish off on the Russia-Ukraine conflict, where President Volodymyr Zelensky has once again drawn a hard line in peace negotiations with Moscow. Speaking today, he declared that Ukraine will not legally recognize Russia's occupation of its territories, calling it an absolute red line in any talks. The statement reinforces Ukraine's long-held position that sovereignty and territorial integrity are non-negotiable, even as ceasefire discussions and international mediation efforts continue. Zelensky stressed that no matter the pressure, Ukraine will not legitimize what it views as illegal land seizures by Russia. Okay, Georgie, I just wanted to get quickly, apologies for that confusion, your response for that, the fact that Ukraine says that any territory conceded to Russia, it will simply not view under its constitution as Russian territory, whatever is negotiated. Do you think this is a pathway to peace, this view?
Note, I think that according to Russian constitution, these territories are included into Russian sovereign territory. So we are not going to sacrifice our constitution to the constitution of a puppet state, which may be changed anytime.
Thank you very much for joining us, Professor Toleraya. Apologies there for the confusion at the end. We now move over to West Asia, where Israel's military says it has begun the first steps of a major operation to seize Gaza City, the heart of Hamas's remaining strongholds, according to the Israeli government. Troops are already holding the outskirts of the city, according to IDF spokesperson Brigadier General F.A. Defrin, who described Hamas as a battered guerrilla force. At the same time, Israel has called up tens of thousands of reservists, with full deployment expected in September. The push towards Gaza City is drawing strong international criticism amid warnings of mass displacement and civilian casualties. The war, now in its second year, has killed more than 62,000 Palestinians, according to Gaza health officials, alongside the 1,200 Israelis killed in the Hamas October the 2023 attack that ignited the conflict. Efri Defrin, Israeli army spokesperson, stated the following. Okay, apologies for that. We are now joined by Alon Pinkas, who is a former Israeli ambassador. Alon, thank you very much for joining us here on the program. It is a significant day in this conflict. This huge offensive is being launched after mass opposition, both from inside Israel and from its traditional allies across the Western world. Can I get the response from the Israeli people first? What's the feeling as this assault on Gaza City commences, the feeling around the danger of the hostages and also the humanitarian crisis that's going on inside the Gaza Strip? Alon, I believe your audio might be muted.
Okay, is it better now?
Brilliant, thank you so much, Alon, yes.
I'm sorry, Thomas, it was my mistake. I was saying, when you didn't hear me, there are about three separate sentiments that all converge here. The first is the Israeli public was led or misled, rather, to believe that there is a ceasefire and a hostage deal in the making. That was 2-3 days ago. I mean, I'm not even talking about the last 6 months, but that was 2-3 days ago. And now they're being told, essentially, that the Prime Minister, Mr. Netanyahu, is stalling, taking his time, asking for time to rethink the whole idea. And parallel to that, this offensive that you correctly described is being prepared, and over 60,000 reservists have already been called for active duty. And so there's a public sentiment that will probably, in the absence of a ceasefire deal and a hostage release, this public anger will again erupt on Sunday or Monday, as it did last week. The second sentiment pertains to the attack itself in Gaza City. And I think that the vast majority of Israelis don't understand what the point of that offensive is. It's been 22 months, nearly 2 years, that Israel hasn't decisively destroyed Hamas, as Mr. Netanyahu had promised. Yes, Hamas has been significantly degraded. Yes, it's been decimated. Yes, Gaza has been reduced to rubble, but Hamas is still there. I mean, there was just yesterday, there was an audacious attack by Hamas on an Israeli outpost inside the Gaza Strip. So the public doesn't really know what is going on and what is the point and what is the political objective and what is the end game. The third sentiment is total dismay and anger toward Mr. Netanyahu for a variety of reasons that go back to October 7, 2023, when all this began. Take all those three together, and on top of them add the international outcry in the form of 25 countries signing a communique demanding that Netanyahu end the war. Several more countries, including major Israeli allies like France, Britain, Australia, have indicated that they intend to recognize a Palestinian state in the next UN General Assembly this coming September. And you see a public that doesn't really know, doesn't really understand, and doesn't really like where this country is headed.
Yes, Alon, what a lot of Israeli allies have released statement about is obviously the intentions of the Israeli government, especially, of course, the Netanyahu government, that of the National Security Minister and that of the Finance Minister's outspoken views. There has been statements from particularly Bezalel Smotrich when it comes to his statements where it says that Gaza will be completely destroyed. How representative of this is Bezalel Smotrich's views, his far-right views, may I add, on Israeli society? He has been sanctioned by numerous Israeli allies in this conflict. And how reflective is that about how Israel truly feels about the Gaza Strip and its people?
Oh, that's a good question. We need to draw a distinction between Smotrich himself, who, according to every major poll in the last year and a half, does not cross the necessary threshold to get into parliament, meaning that his real electoral weight is marginal, and that of the sentiment that he represents. You have to understand, I mean, I say this for the viewers, I'm sure you do, the level of anger, of dejection, of humiliation, of revenge that exists in Israeli society at large since October 7, 2023, since the Hamas terror attack, should not be discounted. At the same time, people viscerally understand that if you occupy Gaza, you own Gaza. There are 2.3 million people in Gaza. And if you occupy Gaza without a plan, without a coherent political framework, without an end game, without a detailed idea of how you're going to govern Gaza, none of those Israel has, none of those Israel expressed any interest in doing. You're basically stuck with 2.3 desolate people living in a very dense swath of land, hopeless, foodless, waterless, medical supplyless, and so on. And so on the one hand, the public is still livid and angry as to what had happened in October. On the other hand, I don't think that what Mr. Smotrich, who's not just a, you called it outspoken, Thomas. He's not just outspoken. He's an extremist, ultra-nationalist, messianic, dangerous man. But if I may add one more sentence, I think politically, it's a mistake to separate between him and Mr. Netanyahu. He may be outspoken. He may say what is on his mind, and you have to give him credit for that. He's not lying. Mr. Netanyahu thinks very similarly, yet he somehow shields it and packages it in softer language. But that they are not that different. And in consistent polls, this is a minority view in Israel.
Elon, now let's talk about the international isolation that Israel is currently facing, not just from its adversaries, but from seemingly encroachingly its allies. We've had multiple statements from multiple traditional allies of Israel, including the United Kingdom, including France, who of course, among others, who of course plan to recognize a Palestinian state at the United Nations General Assembly in September, but of course have also been outspoken about this new offensive and the potential consequences it might bring for the people of Gaza and of course the hostages that are still held there. Who we haven't heard about is the Americans, of course. However, they have not released a statement condemning any of Israel's actions. However, a July 2025 Gallup poll says that only 32% of Americans now support Israel's military action in Gaza. We have to look at also of course, the European response. Is Israel worried about the possible future of its role on the international stage? How do you think the consequences of this war are going to fall on future generations of government?
This is a classic. Well, it's not classic because it's almost unprecedented. But this is a textbook case of self-devaluation, of brand devaluation, of self-destruction, of brand self-destruction. These are all euphemisms. These are all synonyms for the same phenomenon, and that is that Mr. Netanyahu tarnished Israel's image in the world almost, and I say almost because you need to leave some latitude here, beyond repair. Now, if you look at Mr. Netanyahu's pattern of behavior, he relishes being in that situation. He believes that us against the world serves him politically. I'm the only one who stands up for Israel forcefully. The world is against us because the world is either anti-Semitic or they don't see the threat of extremist Islam, radical Islam, as I do. Okay. But there is a critical mass, Thomas. There's a critical mass of opposition and condemnation that is being formed. You mentioned Britain and France, but it's also other countries in Europe. It's also Canada. It's also Australia. It's also New Zealand. You see the relative indifference of China and India, two huge powers, on this, and we're left, as you absolutely accurately pointed to, with this American standoffish attitude that is being interpreted by Mr. Netanyahu as tacit support or green light, but some interpret it differently as the Americans saying, you know, you made this bed, you sleep in it, meaning we're not going to get it. We'll support you, but we're not getting involved. Now that poll that you pointed to, the 32% in the Gallup poll from July, if you look at other polls, not only do they come up with similar numbers, but they show that a growing number of Trump voters, of Republican voters, have developed an opposition or a critical approach to America's Mideast position. So in that respect, Israel is in a very dire situation, which Netanyahu, who's only thinking about his political survival, seems to be completely impervious to.
Elon Pincas, thank you. Pleasure to speak to you. Thank you for taking out the time and talking to us here on NewsX World. Well, that is all that we have time for, but we will continue to bring you more news updates from around the world. Thank you for joining us.